to the front of the net. Puck work to the outside to Eklund. Howe back to Eklund again. Kerr sparring with Stevens in front. Eklund creeps behind. Out in front to Curry. Scores! Tim Kerr and the Flyers are perfect on 5-on-3s. They are 3 for 3. Get their first power play goal of the night and tie the game.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 175. After sputtering, coming back from the All-Star break, the Flyers losing 2-1 to the Islanders in a kind of a lackluster affair. The Islanders kind of lifted by the Bo Horvat trade, maybe playing with a little bit more spring in their legs. The Flyers have 30 games more to play. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the NHL trade deadline and some communication issues that have dogged the Flyers.
Do I have echo problems right now?
Yeah, unfortunately so. So that was Chef B. He's at Chef to the Left B, and he's with us tonight. As you know, Dan Silver, who can be followed at dsilver88 on Twitter, is away on a work assignment. And before we bring in our prestigious guests, as we're working through some of the technical things, as we record this tonight, Twitter is having a major hack or breakdown or something like that. So we've had to work around that. And we're doing just that. So in the interim, just a reminder that the O&B Puckcast is on 12 podcast platforms, among them Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Deezer. We have a YouTube channel. Just plug in there, O&B Puckcast. We have a Facebook page. We have a Getter. We might need that tonight. You can get us on Getter at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast, and of course on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, if they ever work out their problems. And the reason why we mention that is if you follow, subscribe, whatever it is that you need to do on a particular platform, it helps move us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And we really do appreciate that. So without any further ado, this gentleman has been on our show before. You know him from SpectorsHockey.net. He writes for Bleacher Report, Sports Illustrated. You write for so many outlets. Lyle Richardson. I can't keep track. How are you, man?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me back, guys. It's
it's great.
It's been a while. Yeah,
it has been a while. I was in Florida last time, and right. It just so happens I'm in Florida now because I moved there, relocated. So it was
all settled in now, I hope.
Yeah, well. God, that was a rough ride, right, Chef? So we have Chef back now. How we doing there?
Is that good?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's working out.
Okay.
We got a little echo earlier. It worked out fine. I know we're going to talk about a lot of things I just mentioned. It just occurred to me that the biggest news but probably the reason why Twitter broke down to begin with was the All-Star game festivities. Everybody just couldn't stop talking about the 3-on-3 games, the skills competition, and no.
No. Well,
If
Well, people
anybody's
were
talking about
it, but
national
not for-
news right now,
people were
Lyle,
talking about
it's-
it, but not for the right reasons.
yeah, it's the NHL viewership is down 22%, and I thought you might want to weigh in on that. Did you agree with some of the responses on social media about why, and did you have your own opinion on that?
Well, I mean, a lot of some of the reaction that came back. Well, I mean, when for example, when the report was first came out, and I believe it was Sports Business Journal that broke that, they did say the reasons why it was down. I mean, part of it being regional blackouts was a big one. They're at the time they're going up against NFL football, so that was part of it. So there were some legitimate reasons why it was down 22%. And I am inclined to agree with Commissioner Bettman when he's saying, well, look, let's see what things look like when we get to the end of the season, because of course, after this weekend, they're not going to be up against the NFL anymore. So there's no worries about that for the rest of the season. I mean, plus the ABC, broadcast will start kicking in as well. So there's some different factors going on there. That also being said as well, I don't think you really accounted for streaming services like ESPN Plus, that sort of thing as well. So that would also affect it. But I also do think, though, too, there is some legitimacy to some of the criticism about basically how some of the games are being televised. There's some complaints about the crews covering the shows, the play-by-play people, that sort of thing. So I think some of that's legit. That could probably drag the viewership down a bit. But I'm inclined to believe more of that the actual reasons have to do with the aforementioned that Sports Business Journal had also mentioned.
Yeah, that makes sense, Chef.
Well, I would also add in there, I know you mentioned the streaming. The streaming hasn't been that good. No. I mean, I don't know. I've caught a couple games where it kicks out, it's on a delay, and, all of a sudden your phone's blowing up because somebody scored a goal and you're still waiting for the TV to come back, or your TV to upload it, or your device to kick in. And you're like, wow, this is – so they've had a bad experience so far. I think because they are over so many different platforms now, that the announcers, they have some good announcers. They have some good commentators too.
Sure they do.
I'm not saying that either way, but I'm saying now, just much like an NFL talent or NBA or NFL or all the sports, once you get that pulled over such a diverse area, you're going to have to hire new people to do these jobs that they maybe not are normally good at, so the announcing in some of them has been a little subpar, and I could see the complaints about that. And I'll say this, it's new. It's a newer product for hockey. I mean, I'm sure that, and we're showing our age by saying this, like how somebody like Howard Cosell, when he had to call games or Tim Saunders, I'm sure when Tim Saunders started out with the Flyers or started out broadcasting years ago, he wasn't perfect either. But he didn't have to do that on a national stage, and they're asking a lot of these commentators here. So I think, heck, just hang in there with these people and let them. It's going to be a rough ride for the first year or two, but let them get their feet underneath them and get their voices ready.
Okay, well, I'm just weighing in with this. It's one thing to have a soporific like Sean McDonough, who's probably only good for baseball. He's I don't think he's been doing them lately. And then you have a confounder, a skewing variable named Leah Hextall. God bless her. I think she's pretty good in the studio, but the force feeding of the round peg in the square hole with hers on play-by-play has been, I think, justifiably criticized. So there are some things like that. She certainly knows the game, but I think there are people like that who are being utilized in maybe not the best way. But I mean, for me, it's the things Lyle was talking about, the reliability of the streams and not knowing when the game, where to find the game, and the blackouts, which seem very strange. In Tampa, if the Flyers play Tampa, I can't get them down here because I'm in the Tampa area. So that's kind of like, why? I'm paying for ESPN Plus.
I'm up here in Canada. Okay. you would think that I would be able to see things like if the Toronto Maple Leafs are playing the Edmonton Oilers, you think I'd be able to see that game on Sportsnet, right? Because Sportsnet's the main carrier for Leafs games here in Canada. Oh no, you're not in Leafs region. You can't watch the game. And it's just like, what is the point of view? Why am I seeing that on all 4 of my Sportsnet channels, and I go to watch it and none of those 4 work because I'm not in the Leafs region. So again, what is the point of view? Why?
I will say this: the NFL, for all of its faults and over the years, they're probably the very best at marketing themselves. You're not going to get like I think they had blackout problems before, correct? In the late 80s, early 90s, remember? Yeah. And they fixed that because that's revenue for them that they're losing if they do that. And I think until the NHL realizes that they're losing revenues, there's no point. Somebody signs up for ESPN Plus for however much it is, it doesn't matter. If they're not going to pay for it if they can't watch a game, so it's pointless for them to have it. So in that respect, they got to be a little smarter and I would say you take the hit for the first couple of years to make it a cheaper and more accessible to everybody, because that's how you grow your game. If you ever want to compete, like I'll give you this. I don't know about up there in Canada and all, but soccer down here, the MLS really did a fantastic job of making their presence known. And it's dangerous. It probably, I predict it passing the NHL in the next 3 years if they don't get their act together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's very possible. The thing, it's an article of good faith. They always talk about growing the game. So, take the little hit. I'm not more likely to go to an NHL game because it's not on TV in most cases. The games are expensive. I know everything is more expensive than it used to be. So it is a decision these days for people to maybe have to sacrifice other areas of their life, entertainment, what have you, as opposed to taking a family down and spending a small fortune for a night out, especially to see a team like the Philadelphia Flyers right now.
Well, part of the thing too, when it comes to blackouts as well, and I mean, especially here in Canada, is because some of it is regional broadcasters, right? Some regional broadcasters have the rights to certain games. So, sorry, no, we can't watch it nationally, right? So that's part of that's part of the blackout issue there as well. But some of it is like that old-fashioned thinking of, well, if we show them the games in the local area, they won't go and watch the games live, which is absolutely freaking stupid. If you've got a popular product, people are going to go and they're going to say, damn, I want to go and watch a game. Let's go to a game, Flyers are in town or, whatever. Let's go down and watch the game. Our team's in town. Let's go watch them kick ass, So that's not going to keep you away from attending the games. That's kind of an old-fashioned leftover mindset for some. I'm not saying that's the prevailing reason behind the blackouts, but if it's ridiculous. You put the games on TV and people are going to want to come see them, and put them on nationally, for the love of God. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah. That's the old Wirtz family. When
dollar bill.
When the one brother passed away, it was like night and day. The whole franchise just was lifted. I know that wasn't the only factor, but I mean, it came together synergistically for that whole franchise. So that's just a lesson there, I think. The Flyers, as we move along, they went 10-4-2 between the holiday break and the All-Star game weekend, not counting what the Islanders flame out the other night. And we're going to talk a little bit later. I'm going to tease this. The Flyers are actually on the verge of making a major decision that I think Elliot Friedman and Jeff Marek were talking about at the time. And they changed course based on that couple week stretch, which means to us, they were never really committed to what they were doing in the first place. We'll get to that. But, the trade deadline is coming up on, what is it, Friday, March the 3rd?
Friday, March 3rd.
Right. And at 3:00, everything's got to be in. Well, they don't use a fax machine still, do they? Like
some of them still do. Some of them still do.
I heard a story that the reason why they still have fax machines is because long as it's in transmission, it still counts. And whereas you have an instant click and you can see when. You know, it's always, oh, well, we faxed it over, because it's a way to get extra time and a little bit extra negotiating, I think.
Exactly, because the timestamp, if you remember, when you used to get faxes, the timestamp is on the top when you get it. So if it says 2:59:59, okay, it's good. The trade made it 1 second before the deadline. So yes, so that's why trades still trickle in like an hour after the deadline. And TSN up here, they did Sportsnet, they cover it up here, of course, like hours and hours of coverage. And they always remind us when the 3 o'clock point hits, they'll go, now don't go away, because there will be more trades coming in within the next hour, and there usually is. I think it was a couple of years ago was that big trade that the Red Wings and the Capitals did when it was Anthony Mantha going to the Capitals.
Vrana.
Yeah,
Jacob
for Vrana. And it was like, that one was like right at the last second, and it came in after 3 p.m. and people were like, whoa, what the heck? And it's like, wait a minute, how's that trade still coming in when it's after the deadline? And it's like, because they got it in, but they still have to process it. In other words, we're just waiting for the facts to kick in.
Yeah, that's really, and those are the facts, Jack. But I mean, I think the roots of that go back to the Lindros decision, and that whole thing with the Flyers and the Rangers both making a claim on that player. And I think that probably was a start of all this timing and all that. It kind of wormed its way into the trade deadline. But, looking at your list that you just put out recently on Bleacher Report, it was an article that came out, I believe it was Monday. Yeah. And you had about 20 names on there. We're not going to get them all, but there's some interesting names here. In fact, Matt Dumba was one. Now, he's scheduled to be a UFA. He's long been rumored to be someone of interest to the Flyers, whether it's Chuck Fletcher, the fact that he's right-handed, that he's been in and out. And he has a lot in common with the Flyers' Ivan Provorov, who is looked upon as the kind of defenseman who is kind of dependent on who his partner is, and not necessarily the alpha male or the alpha dog, I should say, on that one. And maybe Dumba, he talks and postures like an alpha dog out there, but his play is roughly equivalent to a Provorov. But unfortunately for Dumba, he can't make that quick switch over to Philly and his old mentor, Chuck Fletcher. He's going to be a UFA, so he's going to go elsewhere. What are some of the places you look for a player like that to go?
Well, I mean, that's going to be very difficult. I mean, first of all, I would be very surprised if Dumba gets moved at the trade deadline. A lot of the talk, and I mentioned it in the article there, that a lot of the talk right now is that his trade value was very, very low, which is surprising when you think about, like, 2 years ago, he was like a hot commodity in the trade market, and it almost seemed like a question of any time now he could get traded, but the Wild held on to him. But he's really, really struggled this season. I don't know if he's nursing an injury and we're not aware of it, but so I would be surprised if he goes anywhere at the trade deadline. If you're talking about free agency in the summer, right now I have to be honest, I'd say too early to tell for Dumba. I'd have to we'd have to have a look at what teams' needs are going to be when we get there. The other problem too is for Dumba right now is he's a right shot defenseman, and the need right now is for left shot guys. That's why you keep hearing guys like Jacob Chychrun coming up in the rumor mill. That's why Vladislav Gavrikov of the Blue Jackets keeps coming up. Joel Edmondson of the Montreal Canadiens keeps coming up. They're all left shot guys, and you got teams like the Los Angeles Kings, the Edmonton Oilers, Toronto Maple Leafs. They're all looking for left side guys. Even the Boston Bruins are at least kicking tires right now, looking at maybe bringing in another lefty. So, there's not really much of a market for somebody like Dumba right now, or, I'm not saying there's no place that a right shot defenseman can't go. But the other problem for Dumba as well is he's still got that $6 million cap hit as well. That's why you would see somebody like Luke Schenn of the Vancouver Canucks, who's only earning, I think, less than $800,000 this season. Teams are lining up to get him because, of course, he comes very cheap. Now, he's not a puck moving guy like Dumba is, but if you're a playoff contender who has very little cap space, man, you can grab a guy who's earning $800,000, over somebody who's making $6 million this season. Well, yeah, that's the guy you're going to go for. So I'm not saying Dumba won't be moved, but I think it's a very unlikely that it'll happen.
Yeah, no, I can see that. It's more of an off-season acquisition, and might be somebody who's on the Flyers' radar, particularly with the kind of season that Tony D'Angelo has had for the Flyers. Lots of points. He actually could be a trade candidate too, because if you slot him in the lineup, and you're just looking for offense and not asking him to carry that much responsibility, that kind of load, then he makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. And that would be kind of interesting as well if the Flyers don't trade Provorov. It's like you said, they're kind of looking for that guy to slot in on the right side. They haven't been able to fight. Well, they thought they had it in Ryan Ellis, but sadly his career is done. Basically they haven't had anybody there since Matt Niskanen retired. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Dumba's a guy who comes in there and does that. But are you going to be able to get him? I don't think the Flyers would want to sign him to a long-term deal. We also don't know how well, if he'd be a Torts guy, that's another thing that's key as well. But maybe he comes in on a 1-year deal, kind of tries to, maybe take a chance on himself, kind of like what John Klingberg did with Anaheim, though it hasn't worked out as well for Klingberg as he'd hoped. But maybe it's that kind of thing. I don't know. But, you can't rule him out as being perhaps on the Flyers' radar, especially if they decide that, no, they still want to hang on to Provorov. They want to find somebody to slot in there with him.
No, absolutely. And a guy like Klingberg, I mean, Anaheim's in a position where they might be able to, they definitely would be willing to hold back some salary to move on from the player.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very similar to the Flyers, James Van Riemsdyk, where if the Flyers want something like a second-round pick for him, because he's having a nice year. Stats are good. Yeah. He's having a good mentoring year for young guys. So that really speaks to general managers. Like, his attitude's really been great. And he's always been known as a pro's pro in that regard. Yes. So if the teams are willing to hold the kind of money on players like Klingberg and JVR, which would roughly be about $3.5 million, maybe the Flyers can get a second-round pick for that player, and maybe Anaheim, well, maybe not. I still think Klingberg could probably bring a second rounder, you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, their value is, right now, I mean, looking at it, all of us looking at it, we could say, yeah, second rounder tops. I mean, last year, but remember, who can say when general managers get desperate? I mean, I still shake my head that the Montreal Canadiens got a first round pick for Ben Sherratt. Not that he was a bad defenseman, but the consensus was second round pick. Yeah. Tops. Second round pick, take that and run, Montreal, be happy you got it. And he got a first plus a prospect. And, we were just, full disclosure, I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan. I was thrilled by that, shocked and thrilled, So you can't rule that out. But honestly, though, I think a second round pick for JVR, same thing, second round pick for Klingberg. I think, that's given where their stock is. Though I would say JVR stock's a little higher because remember, he had a good season last year too. So, that plays into it. It isn't like, oh, he's picked up his play in his contract year, no, he's been pretty consistent. So, I think Van Riemsdyk is a guy that's definitely going to move. I think that's a guy that the Flyers will move if they can, as you say, get a good return like a second rounder.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and just running down the Flyers list, guys like Patrick Brown, low salary, fourth penalty killing fourth line center. And then so look, a center, it bumps him up a little bit. And then you have Justin Braun, who hasn't played a lot this year. Yeah. And you would think that, kind of like a mid or late round pick, a Chef.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know we talked about left-handed Ds being more on the market right now than rights. I mean, how does this hurt the Flyers moving Justin Braun, age veteran? I'm sure everybody could use that seventh defenseman during playoff time. I got to understand that this might devalue him just a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it could. It could. I mean, but, you recall he did get traded last year at the deadline too, I believe. So, as you said, there a lot of teams could still use, like you said, that seventh D, in case injuries hit you in the playoffs. And, you're not going to get very much, in return for him. Maybe unless he's a throw in with JVR going somewhere, who can say, right? Bumps it. Maybe that bumps up the return from a fifth round pick to a fourth, but it's like you said, I mean, he hasn't played much this year. So, I mean, everybody knows what he's capable of at this stage in his career. But obviously JVR is the guy who's going to have the most value. At least we're not hearing any more Travis Konechny trade rumors, because I thought they were stupid. Can I just get that out there right now? I thought they were ridiculous.
Yeah, well, you got to start somewhere when you're building a team. And if you trade away everything, that means you're starting over all over again, not this year, but 3 years from now. So there's some pieces here that you want to hang on to if you can.
Absolutely. If you can. If he wants out, fine. Yeah, then send him along. But, he's playing well under Tortorella.
Yes.
That's the thing. We talked about this before. The last time when you guys had me on, we talked about it. We said there are players who just don't play well for him. They don't like his style. And there are others who thrive under him. He's kind of like that throwback to Mike Keenan. There were guys who hated playing for Keenan, and there were others who just loved playing for the guy, who rose to the challenge and met the demands. So, but Konechny, that's why I said, he's having a heck of a season. That's a guy you can hang on to. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And two guys that, referring earlier to the Chicago Blackhawks, Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. And the big speculation, one of them is nursing an injury, is not quite, I forget which one.
Patrick Kane.
Kane.
It's lower body, but the word that has come out lately is hip injury. Now, how serious it is, we don't know. Apparently it's something he can play through for the rest of the season. But, if you're going to go after him, that's something that's going to kind of play in the back of your mind, and it could affect what the Blackhawks get in return.
No doubt about it. So they're going to have to eat salary. I mean, they've done everything. Yeah. They've done everything to tell the whole world that we want Connor Bedard. You just have to wonder that when they, pick the lottery balls that night, if he's going to end up like Tim Murray, I mean, it's so blatant, it's, you almost wish, I don't wish, I'm not like that, but it's just, they're not, there's no pretense. So I'll give them that much, but
they're being honest. He said, this is what we're doing. I'd say that, but they're not a lock for that. If you take a look at the standings, it's the Columbus Blue Jackets that are at the bottom of the pile, and the Blue Jackets were not trying to tank this season when it started. They had a very promising performance last season. They were going into this, they had Johnny Gaudreau, they'd re-signed Patrick Laine, they were really excited going into this season, and then boom, just the injuries hit. This wasn't a case, they had a bit of a rough start before the injuries started to pile up, but then it just accelerated. When you start losing key guys like Zach Werenski, Laine was out for a while. Guys like Boone Jenner, their captain, he's out for a while. That contributes to that. So the Blue Jackets are where they are, not because they were trying to tank the season. They really wanted to make the playoffs this year. It's the same as like the Montreal Canadiens last year. Say what you will about them being dead last, but they did not start that season coming off a Stanley Cup final appearance. Go, okay, now we're going to tank the season and go for a first round pick. It's just the way it worked out. But to your point, Chicago, there was just no question. And, in a way, part of me would not be upset if the lottery balls did not drop Chicago's way. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to get an excellent pick if they wound up picking, say, second overall. But, oh, man, if those lottery balls knock them down to, second or third or fourth, oh, my Lord. Just ask the Detroit Red Wings what it's like to try and tank a season. Didn't work for them. Now they got some good players out of it, but still didn't work for them.
No, it's funny how that works. And a lot of people forget. I always point out that people wanted the Flyers to do the same thing this year, and I just think of 2017 they lucked out and they got Nolan Patrick. It wasn't anybody's fault that they whiffed the pick other than the front office, but probably Ron Hextall made the final call there. And then in 2007, they weren't trying. They were just a horrible team, and they got cheated out of Patrick Kane, to be honest with you, in this podcaster's opinion. So it's Hall of Famer. They got JVR as a nice player, but you know the deal. So you just never know. That's the bottom line.
Exactly. You don't know how those lottery balls are gonna fall. But well, look, 2016. The Colorado Avalanche were dead last. But who got the first round pick that year in 2016? It was the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That was Matthews, right?
That's right. And Austin Matthews. The lottery balls did not fall Colorado's way. So, same thing in 2015. If memory serves, Edmonton, I don't believe Edmonton was dead last that year. I think they won the lottery. And that's how they got Connor McDavid. If memory serves, I could be wrong on that one. But I do know that the year Colorado finished dead last, they did not win the lottery that year. So
yeah. No, I hear you, and it's just it's not worth gambling a franchise when your best chance is what is it? Is it 18%?
18.5% chance of winning.
Yeah, I got to do better than that. Speaking of players that still have term on their deal, where a salary will have to be retained, one player is very high up on everybody's list in terms of a trade block is Brock Besser, especially in light of the fact that Vancouver's announced the position. They moved on from Bo Horvat. I think they got a pretty good value deal on that. Besser's got, some contract left over. So it's going to be tougher. There's going to be a retention. How do you read that one?
Well, there are teams that are interested. I mean, TSN's Darren Dreger last week was saying, there are teams after the Horvat deal went down. Teams have been calling them and saying, look, we're interested in Brock Besser if you retain salary, because he's earning $6.65 million a season. He's got 2 more years to go on his contract. And a lot of those teams right now, so many teams are just so cap strapped. I mean, you've got like 17 teams alone are using LTIR just to be cap compliant. You got another 6 teams that have like less than $5 million in cap space. So you don't have a lot of teams there with a lot of money to throw around. So with Besser, it's possible that he could get moved at the trade deadline if the Canucks are willing to retain salary. But honestly, the Canucks want that complete salary off their books because they are looking to put that money towards bringing in younger players. So I would say Brock Besser would probably be a more likely off-season move, because there will be more teams that will have more cap space, and you got a better chance of moving that whole salary off your books, right? Because the other thing too, if you're retaining salary, now you're looking at the rest of this season plus the next 2 having that dead cap space, and okay, that's not as long as it would be, say, if you were to buy him out, because then that would be 4 years, but still, with cap space, it's such a, so tight right now. And it looks like it's going to be tight again for next season before after that, finally it picks back up in a big way, that a lot of teams just aren't going to be able to be able to afford his entire salary right now. So that's why I think it's more of an off-season move when you see teams that tend to have more cap space, even with the cap only supposed to go up by $1 million again for next season. Yeah,
definitely see that. And especially for a player who's had, a lengthy injury history and, as good as he is, going right to the top of the list and working back down a little bit as we finish this up. Timo Meier is really having a great year, and he's going to need a big qualifying offer this season after next. So it's really interesting that this is a younger player, and you would think that he'd be kind of like an investment, not too dissimilar, but maybe younger to Bo Horvat, except his contract situation is different.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Myers, he's a restricted free agent this summer, whereas Horvat was unrestricted. He's a year away from UFA eligibility. In other words, next summer he'd be UFA eligible if he only gets a 1-year deal. What makes this situation interesting is he carries a $6 million cap hit. I mean, over half of that's been paid out now, but it's good. He's actually earning an actual salary, $10 million for this season. And that's how much it's going to cost the San Jose Sharks to qualify his rights. So that's why we've been hearing so much of him being, in a potential trade candidate. Because unless the Sharks and Myers agent can agree to, say, a contract extension where that cap hit is, say, between $8 and $9 million a season, it's just not going to happen. So, that's why you keep hearing that he's out there. Now, if they trade him to, and let's say for argument's sake, it's the New Jersey Devils, because he's been linked to the Devils a lot. The Devils would face the same problem, the same issue. It's like, yes, okay, you've got him. He's a restricted free agent. But again, now you'd have to qualify his rights at 10 mil a season, unless you can agree on a long-term deal that would bring that level down. And most people think that number will start at around 9 million per season. So, because he's not just having a good year this year, he was a point per game player last season. He had 76 points in 77 games last season. He just scored his 30th goal last night in overtime when they upset the Tampa Bay Lightning. So, I mean, he's having another heck of a season. And this is a guy that's, he's in his prime right now. He'd be a fantastic addition to any team, period, be it a cup contender or a rebuilding club. But it's that whole contract situation that makes it kind of tricky right now.
Is he the kind of player that a team like Carolina would say, listen, we can't sign him, but we lost Max Pacioretty, and he's not coming back with that Achilles.
No.
And we're going for it. And this is the kind of guy that might be able to get us over the top. Is that kind of scenario where he could be involved?
It's certainly possible. The Hurricanes, though, they kind of have a reputation not to go after the big fish at the trade deadline. They tend to go more for depth guys whose contracts they can control beyond the season. Now, Meier would certainly fit into that category, but it would cost a lot of money to sign the guy. But I think Carolina, their main area of concern that they need to address isn't bringing in a winger like Meier. They need a reliable second line center. They've tried Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Paul Stastny at that position this season. They've been bouncing both back and forth between those two guys, the second line center. It's not working. So I would have them looking at more at a guy, maybe if they're going to go for it this year, if they're actually going to break with tradition and go for it, I see them going for a center like maybe Ryan O'Reilly, maybe somebody like Jonathan Toews, because they got the cap space now, with Pacioretty going on LTIR, I believe they're going to have over 10 million cap space now, trade deadline cap space.
Right.
And so, they would have plenty of room to bring in a guys like that. Right. But Meier would be a fit to somebody like that. But maybe they decide, well, no, we want a player that we want to keep beyond this. So again, same kind of scenario. Maybe that would work for them. But all the talk seems to have New Jersey, seems to be for Meier. And the reason for that is, their general manager recently said, ideally he'd like to bring in a top 6 winger whose contract they can control beyond this season. Well, Meier's a perfect fit. The question is, how much are you willing to give up to get him? And the Devils, again, they can check that box because they've got a lot of good young talent in their system and on their roster that they could part with. And something else I can just add very quickly. I think the other reason too, maybe you bring in Meier if you think you're going to have a problem re-signing Jesper Bratt. Okay. If you're going to have a problem,
like that too.
Yeah, if you're going to have a problem signing him, Meier becomes your insurance policy. You can afford to have both on your team for the rest of this season, but you're going to need to. It's either one or the other if you're going to go that route for next season and beyond. So if you think Bratt's going to be a problem to re-sign, hey, you've got Meier there. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I've also heard the Rangers are interested in Meier as well. So yeah, be interesting to see how that pans out.
Oh, geez, that's the last thing you need, right?
Yeah. What do you give the team that has everything? Well, the Rangers do need a right side top 6 right winger. They do need that, but
Well, the Flyers have a lot of those. A couple of them are injured though, or oft injured. We'll have to see how that plays out. Then we got a couple wrap up with a couple Blues. Tarasenko, you mentioned Ryan O'Reilly, and then we'll get to Jacob Chychrun and rack that up there before we move on to the Flyers.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Chychrun, as we all know, he's been in the rumor mill since last summer. It's the never ending story, isn't it? Listen, he would have been traded last summer, but the Coyotes general manager, Bill Armstrong, he has his price and he is not wavering from it. And it's believed to be 2 first-round picks or 1 first-round pick and a player who is an equivalent to a first-round pick, i.e. a top prospect or a really good young player, plus a prospect or player. So you kind of get where it's coming from. Basically, it's 2 first-round picks and a prospect is what we're talking about here. And, he's not budging from that. And he has a good point because if you look back to last season, when the Bruins acquired Hampus Lindholm, from the Anaheim Ducks. What did they get in return? Well, first of all, it was a huge deal. They got a first round pick. They got a couple of second rounders, and they got two players, right? So, right. And one of those players was a former first round pick. So basically, that's what the Coyotes general manager is looking at. He's saying Hampus Lindholm is a comparable player to Jacob Chychrun. This is what the Ducks got for him. This is kind of what we're looking at. So that's kind of fair. I can understand that.
And he's not making a lot either, too. So.
Oh, and that's the other thing too. Yeah, he's a cost controlled asset for 2 more seasons after this one at $4.6 million a season, and he's only 24. God, he's been in the league 6 years, but he's only 24, and it's like, man,
In your opinion, is he a standalone number one defenseman, or is he more of like a complementary top pair guy?
He's kind of on the cusp of being that standalone guy. The talent is undeniable. The problem is his health. He's been injured a lot. I mean, this past summer, the reason why he was delayed by about 7 weeks starting the season is because he had off-season surgery on his wrist. But since he's come back, I mean, he's been fantastic. I think it's 25 points in 32 games and a +6 since he returned. He's just, he's just ripping it up. And so everybody's just like, hey, all right, this could be a guy worthwhile. So he's kind of on the cusp there. If he can stay healthy, then I think he could absolutely be that standalone guy. That's why there's so many teams that are interested in him. It's just none of them want to pay that asking price right now.
Right. And maybe this is the year that Vlad Tarasenko finds his way out of St. Louis.
Oh, if he's not gone on the trade deadline, he's definitely gone as a free agent this summer. Listen, he's handled that whole thing well since the time he made his trade request nearly 2 years ago. He's kind of handled it well. He's played well for them. He hasn't let that be an issue, or he hasn't been a problem in the dressing room. Excuse me. But I honestly, I think between him and Ryan O'Reilly, I think of those two, Tarasenko's the more likely to go. I still think the Blues want to keep Ryan O'Reilly, and he wants to stay. It's just a matter of, can they come up with a contract that's going to be suitable? Because for O'Reilly, it's going to have to be a short term. I'm thinking 4 years, no more than 4 years, and he's going to have to take a pay cut to do it. He's making $7.5 million a season now. They would probably want him down to 5.5 to 6 million, honestly. And I think that's a fair thing to do because, his best years are, he's starting to reach the point where his best years are behind him. The style of game that he plays, it takes it out of you a lot sooner than it does, say, if you're a one-dimensional scorer, that sort of thing. So I think of the two, I think Tarasenko is more likely to be gone at the trade deadline than Ryan O'Reilly.
Yep, makes sense. One guy who still has some time left as we pivot toward the Flyers, who's definitely rumored and could be moved this season, even before the summer, is Kevin Hayes. There's a lot of talk out there that there are teams that are interested. The Flyers have identified him as he's having a great year and all that, and they keep making, I think, paying a little lip service to the fact that Hayes and Torts have kind of papered over their rift. Mm-hmm. But I'm not really a believer that is the case. And there is some good scuttlebutt out there from reliable sources that if the Flyers make him a $4.5 or $5 million player, he's got 3 more seasons left, including this year.
Yeah.
If it's the kind of team that he would feel comfortable with, which obviously I would think would be a winning team, he could be moved along. Okay. So, Chef, why don't you weigh in and we'll see what happens.
Well, Kevin Hayes, I think, is going to be a more delicate situation. I see that as more a trade deadline, like not so much more as a trade deadline, I should say, as off season before the draft. I think that's more palatable, and I think it gives them a little extra time. And I also see, I mean, we're hearing Provorov wanted to get out too a couple of times. We've heard that, and I can see both of them definitely being more draft day or right before the draft in the summer. I see them because I think they need a little bit more finesse in order to make those moves. That's not something, and to be honest with you, I don't see Chuck Fletcher having that savvy to do that in the next 28 days to find out where. I'm not being mean about it. I just don't think he's savvy enough to pull it off to do all the things that are necessary to move those guys out. But more importantly, you got to get a good return on it. because let's face it, Kevin Hayes is having a career year. He's doing very good, even under a coach that benched him a couple times. All right, so right there tells you one thing. And then you have Provorov, who's pretty solid. He's average. I mean, he struggled a little bit this season, but he's still, if he's not a 1B, he's definitely a 2A plus plus. So you don't want to not get what you're entitled to, I should say, out of this. So this can't be a rush job that I don't think Chuck can do in 28 days. So that's my point on. That's my opinion on that. I think there's other little players that all the guys mentioned, like Brown and Braun, and there might be a couple other here and there too that they can move to make room to really start the rebuilding. But I don't think the rebuilding of this team starts until the off season, because I think, judging by everything we've heard, especially with the letter coming out, and I know we'll get to that soon, but we now know who has the real pull on this team, and I think it's the coach. And if he wants to, I get the feeling if Torts goes, no, I like that player, we're not trading him, he's part of my plans, I think he wins that argument. And I think you'll see that in order to put a stamp on his team in the future, and I said it a couple of times on these podcasts, that you're not playing for your job now. You're playing for your job next year and the year after when you're playing for Torts. It's never just right now. It's always conditional with what you're doing and how the future lies with you.
Yeah. And Chef, I can't disagree with you regarding what you're saying about Hayes and Provorov as well. Those don't sound like trade deadline moves to me. Just because, again, like the reports about Hayes, the recent ones about that there's maybe teams may be interested in him. The whole talk, of course, they're interested in him if they'll retain half of his cap hit, which is over $7.1 million a season. And honestly, again, that's kind of like in a Brock Besser situation we talked about earlier. I could see that happening in the offseason where the Flyers would have a better chance of trying to unload the whole contract, right? The whole set cap it. Because if you move it, how many, correct me, is it 2 or 3 seasons after this one for Hayes?
3.
3 more seasons after this one?
Yeah, I do believe so.
Yeah. That's a long cap hit though.
3.
Yeah. That's, if you're asking the Flyers to retain any portion of that, that's 3 years of dead cap space on your books. So if you're going to do that, you would better be getting, now I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, but if you're going to buy out part of his salary to move him, you better make sure that return is going to be worth it, because you're going to have 3 years of dead cap space sitting there. And you'll really feel it next season. The 2 afterwards, if the cap goes up like it's supposed to, then it'll kind of help, lessen that blow. But next season, you'll really feel that bite. And that could mean the difference between, being able to bring in a good player or missing out on it. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you, Chef. I think guys like him and Provorov, who have that hefty cap hit with term remaining on the contract for 2 or 3 more years, you try to move those guys in the off season when you've got more time to basically lay it on the runway to be able to pull this off.
And I'll take it even a step further, because there's people out there saying, I'll take any excuse to get Kevin Hayes and Provy off this team if they're drags on it. I said, yeah, but you got to understand, if you're retaining $3.5 million, that could be an up and coming play. That's your third line center right there, or your third line winger. And that's not how you rebuild a team, by retaining salary. You got to have that stuff open in order to build and keep your futures open. And the best job they can do right now is have the kids that they're doing that are doing well for them, like Noah Cates and these cheaper players, Wade Allison Owen Tippett, these younger players that are cheaper on the fly, because you know what? If you get rid of them or trade them away for something, a future consideration or a draft pick here and there, guess what? Now you're probably going to end up paying $2.5 million on the free agency, because if you could fill that space in house, you would have done it already. So I think that you got to look at, when you're rebuilding, not to sell the whole store just to get a bad contract back out. You don't want to have to get stuck with any residuals that might hurt your rebuilding.
Yeah, I can see that. I think part of the problem with Hayes, though, is he was paid $7 million that everybody admitted was too much, but at least it was a center, a position of need. Well, that position is more one of need than ever before. Noah Cates going forward is probably at best a third line center. We know he'd probably be better as a winger. Scott Lawton would be better as a winger. Morgan Frost hasn't sold anybody that he's anything more than a 40-point player. So there's some urgency perhaps to say, you know what, we might want to take, if not 3.5, we might want to take, we might not mind holding 2.5, because we don't want to pay somebody $7 million to play left wing when we have someone who could do that job. So keep that in mind. The Provorov, I think you can get full value for, because his durability and the fact that his contract is a fair one.
Yeah.
He's considered around the league. At least he's there and he plays the toughest minutes. So it'll be interesting. And don't take your eye off the ball with Tony DeAngelo, like I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And Rasmus Ristolainen has had a good 10 weeks of play. And there may be some guys out there who said, you know what, John Tortorella and Bradshaw have unlocked Mr. Risto. So,
remember, I was the first one to say that. Remember that 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, I said it.
And
it's a very palpable deal for him too.
If Chuck Fletcher can pull that off and trade away Ristolainen, then he may be on his way to the road to redemption.
Maybe. I mean, he has analytically, he has been good. But I will say this.
Yeah. Yes.
I would be not surprised. I'll put it this way. I would not be surprised if the Flyers do not, remain in the form of waiting till everything in the off season, because I think it's a game of musical chairs that Chuck Fletcher has failed at repeatedly. So if the right deal, kind of like Bo Horvat, came along, and Alvin in Vancouver said, you know what, it's kind of what I'm looking for. Let's go. Let's do it. I like the return. I have a feeling this year, with his job on the line, and as we pivot toward what happened recently with just the other day with the letter from John Tortorella, finally, after 3+ years or so of Chuck Fletcher being on the job, when he joined 2019, Chuck Fletcher, he took over for Ron Hextall, and then he ended up firing the coach after Hextall. Yeah. And it was the 18-19 season.
Yeah.
So he's not really been an in-season guy. I have a feeling that when John Tortorella comes out with this letter, Lyle, that more or less says, hey, we got a way to go here. I like this. I like these young players. I like what we're doing. This year has been really good, but let's not kid ourselves. This team is really going to be fun to watch and all that, but we got a way to go. And for him to articulate that vision, which is what you would expect from a general manager as an alpha dog. I mean, right now, for the team to sign off on this letter to the season ticket holders that everybody knows is going to get out there, kind of says, what does Dave Scott, the CEO, and what does that mean when everybody puts their imprimatur on this letter to be presented by Tortorella?
Well, I mean, you and I, Isaiah, we talked about it just before the start of the show, and it just, it almost seems, first of all, that it's just kind of easier to, it softens the blow, I guess, with Flyers fans if it's coming from Torts than if it's coming from Chuck Fletcher, because Chuck Fletcher, let's be honest, Fletcher's burned up almost all his goodwill. If he had any, he has hardly any left now, if he has any at all. Whereas if it's coming from Torts, it's like, okay, he's no nonsense. He's not going to BS you. He's telling it like it is. And I think Flyers fans have been looking forward to this. I don't think if I'm reading you guys correctly, I don't think y'all, especially in the last year, were really keen of this whole aggressive retooling nonsense. I think it was just like, look, it's time, it's time to really start to rebuild. You don't have to blow up the whole team, keep the pieces that are worth keeping and build around them. But enough of this aggressive retooling nonsense. Let's actually rebuild, and that is definitely kind of the flavor of what I got here with that letter and having it come from Tortorella. But it could also be as well that, yeah, this could also be, that this is more Tortorella's team now than it is Chuck Fletcher's team. And he's the one more calling the shots, as you said, saying, no, I like this player. You're not trading him. I don't want him traded. I think, he's a piece we need to build around. Tortorella is going to have a lot of influence here. I mean, that was the whole point of him taking on the job when he came aboard. It was like, he's going to have a say. And, if this is definitely more coming from him than it is coming from, than using him as cover, to kind of sneak in the, oh, by the way, we're rebuilding. Thanks, fans. Bye. Then, it definitely means, I think, one way or the other, regardless of whether it's, Tortorella's the driving force or whether it's Fletcher's using Torts as cover to sneak the whole, we're going to rebuild after all. The bottom line is you're going to be seeing some sort of a rebuild now. Yeah,
it's like that 90s thing where you kind of put your hand over your mouth. Rebuild, that kind of rebuild. I think the thing that really okay, let me get to the rumor. 3 sources. I think everybody's heard this by now. I don't think anyone could cast aspersions on this and say it didn't happen. The Flyers were struggling right before the holiday break. And I talked about how they went 10-4-2 between that point and the All-Star game. And they literally changed course according to some people who were well-placed. And they were ready to move on from Chuck Fletcher and present Danny Briere as the future at general manager. And the big decision wasn't whether that was going to happen. It was whether they were going to retain Chuck in a different job as like a figurehead as the president of hockey operations. Or they were going to move along from him.
Yeah.
And that was where they were at. And I think they were ready to move on. And then when the Flyers improved, I don't know how this argument was swayed. Were they worried about the optics of a guy who was highly unpopular, a guy who kept looking for aggressiveness in every little underlying activity taken by the organization that had nothing to do with player movement? Well, we were aggressive in getting analytics people. Well, we aggressively did this. And in other words, he was so afraid of offending his boss and going against that narrative, really bringing out the beta male that we all believe in and saw. Not being able to signing Ristolainen when he had a first-round draft pick, just like on a silver platter at the trade deadline last year, which to me is like so egregious. And it's like, what that speaks to the people above Chuck Fletcher, Dave Scott, CEO, and maybe Val Camillo has more, influence. She's on the business operations side, I should say. And then, of course, the trio of fans, the fan club of Chuck Fletcher would be probably Paul Holmgren and Bob Clark and maybe Lombardi or Bill Barber. But that old guard, and this is what, Lyle, maybe I'm throwing a lot at you. But remember that Marek and Friedman were talking about the Flyers were ready to step away from something that they had held on to. And I think that goes back right about that time frame. What sort this out for the confused Isaiah here.
Yeah, you are hitting me here with a lot. We have to be careful, obviously, when it's sort of front office, front office rumors here, because people have different agendas and they'll put stuff out there to kind of make themselves look good or what have you. Honest to God, I think the time that they would have moved away from Chuck Fletcher was going to be last summer. I was waiting for it to happen, and it didn't happen. They stuck with him, and they brought in Tortorella, but everybody kind of knew that, look, Torts isn't enough to help you here. You need players. But the thing is the team has actually, if I may be so bold to say, has exceeded expectations this season. Remember, the start of the season, when you guys had me on the show back before the start of the season, the expectation was, oh, this club is roadkill. They're going to be jockeying for, the first overall pick. They're going to be at the bottom. And the thing is, they've actually exceeded expectations. Technically, they are still within range of a wild card berth. As crazy as that sounds, they're a handful of points out. And the teams that are ahead of them aren't playing all that great hockey either. The Penguins have been kind of sputtering. You've got the Florida Panthers are struggling to get back into playoff contention after a rough first half. So there are teams that are ahead of them that they could conceivably still catch. So as you said, that hot streak they went on following the holiday break in between the All-Star break, I mean, yeah, it would kind of, the optics wouldn't look that good if you turned around and you basically handed Fletcher his walking papers in the middle of this. Maybe that upheaval sends the wrong message, who can say? But I definitely think, though, that I think his job's up for review at the end of the season. I don't see them firing Fletcher now. If it's going to happen, it will have to be at the end, I think, toward the end of the season, after they've done an evaluation, and I also think it could depend on where they finish. Let's be honest. If they finish if they actually make it into, and it could happen. If they actually grab a playoff berth, his job is safe. He's not going anywhere. He'll be back for next season if they make the playoffs. If they even come within 2 or 3 points of it, where they've exceeded expectations, I think they could bring him back, right? But if they end up tumbling, and a lot could depend as well on what moves they make at the trade deadline too. If they turn into big sellers and they wind up moving out a bunch of key guys, that sends the team just down to the bottom, then I think Fletcher could be on his way out too.
Yeah, just Shep, before I get to Shep, the biggest problem they have is there are 5 clubs ahead of them, and they're 8 points out, and they played a couple more games in some of those clubs. Others, they're about the same. Shep?
Yeah, and I'm sure, and I'm going to only say it because other people are going to say it, but then you run the risk of handing a guy that might not be here and getting evaluated at maybe after the season, and you're still letting him make trade deadline moves. You're making him to basically decide the outcome of this team. And what if he can't get the deals done? If he sells the team off, of course, they'll be you take 4 or 5 guys out of this rotation, and they're gonna dump points. They're not gonna win. Let's face it. So, and then he could go, well, we were hanging in there until you made me sell everybody, that kind of thing. And people are going to make these arguments. I think by letting him hang on as long as they can, they're putting themselves in a no-win situation. And I think if they just handed the keys to somebody else, whether or not it's the right thing to do at this point, optics wise for Philadelphia Flyer fans, they want his head on a platter. And I think anything that they don't do to do that is like you're caving to a guy that you're not going to keep.
Then the opportunity the time to have done that should have been then a month ago.
Yes.
Even if they were in the middle of this thing, it's just like, as you said, if you're worried about him making deals at the trade deadline when he's basically dead GM walking right now, then what's the point? Just we didn't have enough time to bring somebody in before the trade deadline. Well, and if all of that is part of it, then that speaks to, as you were mentioning, that speaks more to his bosses than him. That talks about a whole bunch of just a massive dysfunction, above him.
That puts Scott's job on the line. Then, if they're not prepared for this and they don't have a plan in place, then Dave Scott should be gone too.
Yeah. And let me throw this into the mix too, if I can.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
As a little hint as to what their thinking is, they gave season ticket holders an incentive that the games, if you re-sign your season tickets for next year, the games in April will be free. So what does that tell you? Because something Elliot Freeman was talking about, it makes it seem like the Flyers might not be that much a great of a watch in April, and that they're not expecting the playoffs.
Yeah.
So throw that into the mix.
There's so many conflicting things here going on, right? But I think right now the time to change, if you're going to fire Chuck Fletcher, the time to do it is past. If you're going to do it, because again, I'm going to refer to the Montreal Canadiens a year ago, back in December of 2021, they brought in Jeff Gorton as basically the hockey ops guy. He's got a long executive director, vice president, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why Montreal does that. He's the hockey ops guy. Right. Okay. But then in January, the following month, they hired Kent Hughes, former player agent. And within a month, Ken Hughes made his first trade, which was a significant one, sending Tyler Toffoli to Calgary for a return that included a first-round draft pick. And then he was off to the races. So if they were going to replace Chuck Fletcher, the time to do it would have been around Christmas or just after New Year's, because now it's too late. It's too late. You replace him now. Who's handling the deals? Who is in there in your front office who's got the capability to do a better job than him?
Well, probably. I mean, Dean Lombardi's an advisor. He's not a full-time guy.
Okay, Dean Lombardi. Okay,
but
I
mean, and they're grooming Danny Briere. But my argument and what's been articulated by guys like Shane Malloy, we've had on, and Russ Cohen, and guys like that. He's not. I mean, he's just following the guy who's not really doing a great job around.
Yeah,
and he should be doing actively. He should be the general manager of Lehigh Valley, and he should be getting experience. Or they should be bringing in, like the Phillies brought in Pat Gillick. And kind of when they won the World Series, and he kind of groomed Ruben Amaro. Well, that I'm thinking the Flyers really need someone like a Pat Gillick to come here, unless or Lombardi wanted to step into a bigger role. I respect him.
Yeah. I mean, Lombardi could be a guy to do that, or you could do like Montreal did and bring in a former player agent, a guy who's a player, actually an actual player agent right now, because Ken Hughes was an active player agent. He was Patrice Bergeron's agent, and several
like
others.
Bill Zito was.
And just brought it. Yeah, exactly. Bill Zito in Florida. So, I just, oh boy. They're putting the dis and dysfunction there, the Flyers, boy.
I think that, to me, at the end of the day, is really what's going on.
Yeah.
When I saw that season ticket holder thing, I'm like, well, they zigged in this direction, and now they're zagging again.
Boy, they're hard to pin down, aren't they? Oh,
yeah.
Boy. Yeah.
Well, Lyle, I think we're going to wrap it right there for your segment, because I know you got another show and you want to take a little break there. And I don't know what to say. I mean, it's always such a fun time having you on. What you have any final thoughts, and where can people find you on social media?
Final thoughts. Well, for Flyers fans, hang in there. Just hang in there, guys. One of my best friends is a Flyers fan, and he just I can't even watch them anymore. And it breaks his heart. He's a longtime Flyers fan, but just hang in there. Where you can find me, of course, spectorshockey.net is my site, and I also write for Bleacher Report. I have a regular rumor column with the Hockey News. And if you read German, I also have a weekly column with Ice Hockey News in Germany as well. So there you are. You can find me in those different places, and find podcasts like this. And I hope I can come back on again sometimes, guys, because I really enjoy it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's always great to have you on. At the least, for a wrap up for that trade deadline. It's one of our best shows. Absolutely, Lyle. Thanks so much, man.
My pleasure, guys. Take care, guys.
All right, take care. Okay, so Chef, that's always fun. He's sorry for the technical things there. We'll see what kind of wonderful editing I can do. But yeah, we did have a technical problem. I zotzed out, and Chef capably filled in. And just before we roll, I just a couple things I thought were so Flyer centric. It wasn't fair to Lyle to include him necessarily. But I think the last thing is really Sean Couturier.
Yeah.
Does him coming back really affect their offseason plan, or are they so going to be deep into a rebuild? It's like, hey, if he comes back, great. If not, we got to do what we got to do regardless.
And I think I brought this up last show too, at the end of it, because look, I mean, this is crazy because you look at, and I say people will argue this. Look how good this team is without Coots and Cam Atkinson right now. And
Hockey 500.
What's that?
Your Hockey 500.
Yeah. So your Hockey 500, that puts you a little bit. And there'll be people that argue, oh, we just need a couple more things to put us over the top. And it's not. I don't know how much you got to, at this point, because you don't know what's up with Cam, right? I haven't heard anything. Have you? So, and that's what I mean. And Coots is rehabbing. Let's just say you get one or both of them back. You should be going into the season thinking that they're going to be average players at best, because I don't see them kicking it in or getting their sea legs back. Look how long
look at Farabee. Farabee's really not been that good this year. He's taken a step back. I know, and he had the surgery. Now I don't know if Atkinson is going to have the replacement as opposed to the.
Did he even do anything yet?
To the fusion. No, I'm saying, but they're going to do. Yeah, he's going to need surgery.
I don't understand why. If you're waiting to do the surgery,
there's a reason.
There's a reason. There's got to be some reason.
Oh yeah.
You would think, because you don't want to dump the whole summer and wait in the summer and then be rushed. Like, I don't know if Farabee decided he wanted to come back or whatever it was. I mean, he's showed flashes.
Onset of a problem, and then he had surgery right away. I thought Atkinson actually had the surgery.
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but either way, I'm looking at, like, if you just take Farabee right now, he's had flashes where he's had good stretches. His eyes there, I think he's still a little gun shy, worried about getting hit a little bit. So that is natural, though. I'm not holding it against him. I expected this to be an off year for him to begin with, because if you look back at historically, look at Giroux. When he had abdominal surgery, it took him a year to get back to form. Kevin Hayes, it took him a year to get back to form. When you have these major injuries like this, it takes your body a year, and it's all about muscle memory and all that stuff to get back to that point where everything's second nature and you're not gun shy.
Okay, but here's the point. Do we have to see Couturier this year? Is that kind of like compulsory?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's like, let him train, train with the team, practice with the team, whatever you got to do. I don't think if you're looking, and I think I asked this question to somebody else before, if it's a moral victory to have him out on the ice for one game, then let him play one game and then the rest of the season and towards the end of the season. But that's it. There's no point for him to come back this season.
He missed a lot of the prior season too, so it's almost like a season and a half.
Yeah, but I don't see. What if it? I don't know. I don't see a purpose to it. I don't really think there's any purpose at all, that any reasoning why you would let Coots play any game.
You might find out that he can't play anymore, and then that could affect your plans.
It could. I mean, that's why I'm saying.
Just food for thought.
Maybe one game towards the end of the season.
I don't know. I might want to get a 10-game look. We'll see. I mean, how much can you rehab? And the surgery was a redo. So we have a failed back surgery. A redo is always, riskier. It can be fine, but let me tell you, your chances of success go down with every surgery for scar tissue or for no other reason. I know that from personal experience. But although mine, we've all been through that. Well, most of the people on the show, which is you and me, and
two out of three O&B guys get attached to that. So yeah,
Atkinson. It's really funny because Anthony DeMarco from the Fourth Period.com was talking about buying out Atkinson because we have so much depth on the right side and Tortorella's been so good at installing his cultural imprint that it makes more sense to buy him out. And it's not a knock on him. It's like, once he's proven that he can play and he's cleared, that could be something. And he also was talking about, and I don't think this is Coots dependent, that who some of the Flyers are, who the Flyers could pursue. Like, for example, if Larkin doesn't sign in Detroit, which I think he will actually, because he's from the area and he wants to play. And Eisman just picks a number and he's not budging.
Yeah. Yep.
But he doesn't have that Florida leverage with the nose tax. Michigan is not Florida. So
yeah, that's true. But there is a lot for staying in the same place for some people, because it doesn't happen much anymore. And if he could stay in his area, everybody dreams of playing for the home team. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I think they have a good situation there, but they haven't been quite as good. They haven't progressed as much. And of course, they're probably looking to get rid of Tyler Bertuzzi, who has got a lot of injury. I really like that player, but he's hurt so much, kind of like a Wade Allison type of situation, but even more established as a player. So I think we're going to wrap it there. The Flyers will play on a Thursday night. That is tomorrow night versus Edmonton. They host them. They host the Predators on Saturday with a matinee, and another matinee on Sunday versus the Kraken on Super Bowl Sunday. Go Philadelphia Eagles.
Yes.
Absolutely. Good luck versus Kansas City. Never wish for bad health, but maybe if Patrick Mahomes can maybe tweak that ankle a little bit more. I think he's got a high ankle sprain. I mean, that really, to me, that's one of the main factors. That and turnovers are big factors in that game. So good luck, Eagles, winning a second Super Bowl if possible. It's been 5 years since they played that one, right? 52. This is 57. Wow. Good luck, Philadelphia Eagles. So with that, final thoughts and where people can find you on Twitter. Apparently, Facebook and Instagram are also, I believe, offline.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, you can
be getting cyber attacked by a certain nation that likes to float balloons. I don't know.
We'll say, but you can, if you can get to me, you can find me at Chef.FB on Twitter. And I'll just say this: I'll wait and see. It's a wait and see pattern for the Flyers, and we'll just hold there, see what trade deadline brings, and the comings and goings, and I'll go from there.
Okay, great. And people can find you on Twitter when it's working.
Yeah, at Chef.FB.
Fantastic. You can find me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget that _520 on Twitter. And tonight, you might want to find us on Getter, O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. It'll be there. And of course, if you subscribe. So until next time, probably in about 10 days or so, because we're going to have one more show before the trade deadline, get a heavy hitter for that day right beforehand, and then some post analysis. We're going to be busy around March the 3rd, that's for sure. Until then, everybody, take care.